Hello, class. My name is Inoki Tukia, and I am going to defend my research here in this video, in this last presentation. Um, this is for Physical Education 589, Dr. Angela Robles for Fall 2, 2018. The title of my research project, or capstone project that is Building Sociocultural Competency in Assessment and Intervention of Polynesian Football. As you can see on the screen, uh, I'll be taking you through my PowerPoint presentation while discussing it in this short video with you, to not only defend but to also to explain different aspects of this research and what it means to me personally and how I believe it could actually benefit coaches, teams everywhere in understanding really sociocultural competency and basically just understanding multiculturalism and diversity amongst athletics. So let's get this going here. My introductory statement here. The purpose statement. The purpose of the study was to build sociocultural competency of Polynesian football among high school football team members by using assessment and intervention. So the purpose for this research was really to see in a small sample group, we'll see here in the later slides, to really examine what the knowledge was of this small sample group as far as what they knew about my culture, the Tongan culture. So I wanted to take this small sample group and give them basically just an intro to my culture, introducing them to different aspects of my culture, religion, food, um, and different traditions that we carry on in the Polynesian culture, in the Tongan tradition culture, to be more specific. So I wanted to just see how this type of interaction with this small sample group would potentially come out to be as far as saying, hey, look, let's see what you know prior to an intervention, and then let's see what you know after intervention to see if there's any improvement in the sociocultural competency of Polynesian football. So that's pretty much the aim of where I wanted to go with this research. Now, the reason why I want to do this is because I have just a tremendous and a big heart for the Polynesian culture. It's not too often that you see too many Polynesians in higher education that either one are pursuing, a postgraduate degree or or even a bachelor or undergraduate degree that is. So I mean, this is something that I think is not only important to my culture personally, but I think it could definitely help out um, everybody really to understand the importance of what it means to really interact with the diversity that we see, not just in football, but in all sports. So this is why I chose to do this particular subject. It's not usually my forte. I'm traditionally, someone who would probably write about the, hypertrophy or maybe mass increases in weightlifting or something in that sense. So this is completely out of my field, but something that I feel very passionate about and something that I want to learn about. And so that's why I chose to do it. Okay, so I had three central questions for my research. As you can see there, question one, what are the team members' level of awareness of Polynesian football prior to the sociocultural competency intervention? So prior to this intervention with my sample group, I asked them, I used the Likert scale survey that really just gauged their knowledge on where they were. So it was more of a pre-assessment to see uh, how my students and what my students already knew about the Polynesian culture and the Tongan culture. So um, that's why that's what that question is really backing up there. So question number two, what sociocultural competency intervention activities were most effective in impacting team members' beliefs and attitudes towards diverse cultures and people? Upon doing the intervention, there was a lot of excitement with understanding just the depth of the uh, the popular haka dance that some of you may have heard of. If not, it's a traditional dance that a lot of not just high schools but colleges do right before competing. It's a traditional dance that goes back centuries ago, where Pacific Islanders would actually perform it right before they got into battle or went into war. So they would do the dance to intimidate their opponents or whoever it was that they were going up against. So, in similar sense, now it's done at the beginning of the game against the rivaling team, and really is just a means of intimidation to try to get the other team, you know, to try to get in the minds of the other team and try to psych them out to get that mental edge, for the team that does perform it. That's probably the primary reason why it was conducted. It's not just a fancy dance that everybody likes to do, and is usually in sync and done in unison. It's actually got some background to it, and so that's another thing too. I want to make sure that when I was given this intervention, uh, that these that this small sample group was able to really not just develop the knowledge behind the haka, but really come to an understanding as to why it came about. So that's that's basically how that research question was backed up there. My third research question, excuse me, what are the team members' level of knowledge and appreciation of Polynesian football post sociocultural competency intervention? This was interesting. Upon the intervention at the beginning, they were actually all six participants were actually very excited about learning about the Polynesian Tongan culture, which to me indicated, that this was going to be something that they would be interested in doing. So even at the end, post intervention, they still showed interest in wanting to learn more about the Polynesian culture, which brings up a few things. But one thing for sure basically just reminds me just the importance of sociocultural competency, not just for the Tongan culture, but also for other cultures as well. What else are these, uh, for in my case, the sample group? What other cultures are they interested in? I mean, I coach at a predominantly Caucasian school where a lot of my students are, they're a little bit more upper in the upper class, higher on the socioeconomic level than others, and so for them to really show this type of excitement to not only want to learn at prior intervention but post intervention really helped me to understand the importance of maybe this is something that needs to really be researched. There is research out there, but not a lot on athletics and diversity and multiculturalism, culturalism. Excuse me. So, with that being said, I'm just going to continue on, but that really is the three basic research questions that I wanted to really point out in this research project to help defend my case in understanding sociocultural competency for Polynesian football. Our research article number one here. Okay, the evidence in this study takes a look at the use of sociocultural contact theory and personalization to explore the interracial interactions that student athletes experience, suggesting that it offers a useful alternative in the multicultural education that improves understanding and reduces prejudice. This is something that I did find a few articles that I found in a few articles. Just the really the prejudices that individuals bring into an athletic program when it's pretty common knowledge. If you don't know anything, for me, I've personally experienced it a few times. If you I've had a bunch of people in my life ask, what's my ethnicity, where you from, and so uh, really this social cultural competency research project was also to aim at just being able to help people understand that, hey, you know, I am Polynesian, and so uh, being Polynesian and having other Polynesians in the athletic field, especially football, um, can really help those that are maybe curious or don't know anything about the Polynesian people. So, um, taking a look at this particular article and the social contact theory, and being able to understand personalization in the eyes of this researcher, really helped me to understand just how important it was to really uh, just be able to understand and bolster the socio-cultural competency that I'm trying to defend here in my research project. Now, with that being said, this article also identifies, Vygotsky, a psychologist who took a look at how past experiences, if we have good experiences in the past, and how those good experiences in the past could potentially lead to positive experiences in the future. Um, Vygotsky, this was his internalization theory that he touched base on. It was actually mentioned in this article, which I found very interesting. And I think even at the high school level, if coaches were to implement, a socio-cultural competency argument or method in the means of understanding uh, diversity and multiculturalism with the athletic team, and having that be a great experience for the students. I think if we take a look at the internalization theory that Vygotsky proposes, I think it makes sense to see that in the future when they do interact with other individuals of the same culture, and they've already been taught in a positive way about that culture, then they could possibly have positive interactions with that individual or that cultural group in the future. So making those two connections, I think, um, was really cool and really something that stood out to me, especially in this research article that I discussed here in this PowerPoint presentation. Now, moving on, research article number 2. Okay, the purpose of this research article, the evidence in the article views the challenges that athletes from diverse backgrounds what they can encounter. Um, this one was interesting because the most important finding within the study is the various ways in which to interact with interventions that help create a positive atmosphere for sports psychologists and sports coaches. So again, this is just an article I was able to find on methods in which to interact with not only um, student athletes of multicultural backgrounds, but being able to once again, bolster the social cultural competency that I believe all coaches should really take into consideration, especially with just the vast diverseness that we have amongst athletics right now, especially in the college level. I think it's something that needs to be taken seriously, something that needs time to be put aside so that students could get the proper teaching on who their teammates are, where they come from, what they're about, what their culture is, what the religion is, what's traditional to them. I mean, these are things I think that can totally stand out uh, to teams and really help teams be successful, which I believe some of this research is kind of aiming towards, and likely that's where a lot of this research needs to be bolstered, and understanding the importance of that and the success rate that it could have on a team. So this research article number 2 just explains just the different methods in which diversity can be obtained with different cultural groups. Research article number 3. All right. The authors seek to understand how the University of Nebraska Lincoln football affects the community at large. Now, the reason why I chose this research article was because I believe that football, um, with which my research paper touches base on, is not only just a great sport, but I think it speaks volumes to how it can affect the community. And so I saw this research article and I read it and I thought, how cool would it be to, put this into my um, capstone and really talk about the game of football and how it could really develop a community. Now, if we're looking, if we're trying to understand, the game of football and how it can increase the success rates and really drive positive feelings and um, social and emotional feelings into a community, you really have to understand how football works. And if football works that way in a positive way, then we really need to understand, well, the players of the team, which are, to me, you know, diverse. And so um, I believe that when you really hone on the game of football and hone on just the really small details of it, and I think one of those details being sociocultural competency of whatever culture that may be part of that football program can really not only help the football team, but then eventually continue to help the community here. So being able to tie the just the community development with football and being able to tie football to sociocultural competency because of the diversity and multiculturalism in football, I think there could be something there, and really trying to establish some sort of truth or some sort of research in the means of, hey, look, if we study sociocultural competency within football, and we know through research, specifically this article, that football brings about sociological effects to a community, which sometimes and can be positive. I think there's definitely something there for individuals to really study and to really understand, and I think this is why sociocultural competency and understanding multiculturalism and diversity, I think it's important because it all it's just all part of one big chain, one link after the other, where we have understanding of diversity. How do we teach diversity, and what does this look like as far as affecting football? Now, football. How does this how does this affect the coaches, the community, the parents? I mean, it's just one link after the other, and I just think that sociocultural competency is definitely a link that can be studied to help understand why the game of football is seen here in Nebraska as something that is an event that really has helped the community, and I think that's just something else that's important, and why we need to understand diversity, and just another reason to really understanding multiculturalism and social cultural competency within football. Okay, so the methodology, the research was conducted only after the primary researcher submitted the institutional review board application. The electronic survey informed consent form. My I had five participants that were underage, so I had to get a consent form from their parents before conducting the intervention, and received approval from the faculty and advisor. The primary researcher then contacted five varsity football players and one varsity coach, and informed them about the interest to take a Likert scale survey that conducted a sociocultural intervention survey followed by a very brief intervention of the tongue and culture. Again, I just provided a survey at the beginning of my intervention, and then after the survey, I introduced my six participants to food, to language, to culture, or to traditions, to the dances that we have. So that was kind of traditional in the traditional aspect. And then we touched base on all these things, and they really came to learn a lot of different things. And we also talked about professional and collegiate players in college and in the NFL, and those that are long gone and those that are still in the NFL. So we were able to discuss in depth for about 30, 45 minutes. Really just the Polynesian culture, the Tongan culture for me, because I am, of Tongan descent. So that was really interesting, really cool for the students to see, especially for those, all five actually, that have never really had another Polynesian in their lives, especially another coach. So that was really neat, and being able to see that. Now my coach, on the other hand, he grew up with Islanders, so he kind of knew already where some of the teachings that I was giving out was going. So that was also neat too, having to have him on the staff and really understand him. And believe it or not, out of our all our coaching out of our five coaching staff members, I get along with him the best. And I think it has something to do with sociocultural competency, but that is something that I guess I would have to later research. But I mean, I find that very interesting that the one I get along with the most is the one that understands me the most. So I mean, you really think about that and you take a look at it, the sociocultural competency intervention that I'm trying to defend here really gets things going and trying to see, well, is this really a thing? Is this really working? And so I think more research needs to be developed, obviously, to understand, you know, just the depth of this and to really get out information out there to other coaches and other athletic teams to understand the importance of race and culture. So we're not always looking, at different races to a racial lens, but actually looking at them as individuals and somebody that we already know about. I mean, it's a great thing once you're able to break through that barrier of that racial lens and understand somebody's culture and really get to know them as an individual. So I mean, that's just one of the things that I really wanted to do this research for. Um, Again, the participants, five of them, were student athletes, varsity football players, and I had one coach who is my D coordinator. And mixed methods were used. The study used both quantitative and qualitative methods to gather data through the use of survey. At the end of the survey, I had each of my participants answer three questions. These three questions were more the qualitative, or excuse me, the qualitative side of the research, and we'll see these later on in my paper. The survey instrument that I used is Sociocultural Competency Polynesian Football Survey, SCPFS. This consisted of 18 questions, two sections, and had demographics, Likert scale questions, Likert scales questions, and open-ended questions as well. All right. Results in the pre-intervention indicated the following: all participants were unaware of the cultural backgrounds. All right. I found this really interesting. At the beginning, the questions were asking them how much they knew about their cultural background, and a lot of them did not know any of their cultural background. So that was really interesting. All participants were interested in learning about the Polynesian culture. I touched base on this both before, and post intervention. Most participants did not know any of the language that is native to the Tongan culture. We were able to go over some language and some small words, sight words that are common in the Tongan culture. So we were able to discuss those, and that was actually really cool interaction with them. Phonetically, they weren't really pronouncing any of the words correctly, but the first time goers, so that's totally understandable. Results in post intervention indicate the following: more research is needed to develop clear methods on how best to teach multicultural awareness in athletics. I said again, there's methods out there, but it's mostly for multiculturalism in education. So I think um, there are things out there for athletics, mostly on African American and African Americans and their race. And so I think you could definitely use that research to further the research in sociocultural competency with all the cultures, and that's basically the aim I took with this capstone paper. All 6 participants demonstrated an increase in volume of knowledge when understanding the Tongan culture during the post-intervention session. Surveys indicated, that there was an increase in developmental knowledge. So students did, or all participants did, gain some sort of knowledge from the intervention, which was cool and which was exciting to see. Um, Next one, a larger sample size is needed to improve the authority of this research question. Yeah, 6 participants was the most that I could do with, especially with my schedule and my time right now. So I would really love to maybe increase this number, and maybe have surveys go out to really see, numbers and statistics that can uh, really help me defend my capstone paper here and understand in depth what is working with sociocultural competency and what isn't working with sociocultural competency, and or how can we better it, to understand it with other schools and other teachers and other coaches. There's not much info. All participants are still interested in learning about Polynesian culture. There's an interest. Last one, there's an interest amongst the sample group to understand different cultural norms. The the interest is there, especially with the small sample group that I had. Um, so I think that's really encouraging to know that students and adults really want to know more about the culture. Now it's just a fact of being aware of the diversity and multiculturalism in athletics. So that's great to see and to maybe even possibly pursue in the future for further research. Discussion is the most critical factors for developing sociocultural competency. Multicultural counseling, which was discussed in an article. I think this is more, I saw a lot of this more on the educational side, understanding multiculturalism within the classroom. And so multicultural counseling was something that came up a lot. This is just really just different ways in which individuals can uh, discuss with students of diversity, um, how to engage students of diversity and multiculturalism. This is just one of the many ways and one of the things that I continue to see in some of the research articles that I saw. Modeling multiculturalism, this is something that was discussed in Article 1 that I discussed earlier in this slide. The skills most important to help in sociocultural competency development. This was developed in an article on Birding and Lambie in 2011, which I also went over. I mean, again, just another method in which to identify diversity and be aware of cultural differences amongst team members and sports. So other areas where the study and current research were supportive included developing social contract theory. This is something I discussed earlier. Again, it's just you eventually in sociocultural competency want to get to a point where you're seeing people of diversity and racial different backgrounds, not so much through a racial lens, but seeing them as individuals, seeing them as, hey, I know your culture and I really want to know more, and really developing a type of rapport that goes beyond just looking at somebody from the outside, but really understanding the individual and getting to know and understand them and develop that knowledge about their cultures. Uh, recommendations, 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 and implications in future research. Uh, Recommendations develop of specific methods to encounter diversity amongst athletics. Coaches need to put aside more time to discuss multiculturalism within sporting teams. This was something that was brought up by one of my participants. He felt that this was the first time ever that he's ever been uh, that he's ever encountered a discussion about multiculturalism or sociocultural competency. So he was actually encouraged by it and actually was asking me how we could probably implement this into our practice or maybe our yearly scheduling. So it's something that I definitely want to bring up with our coaches here. Implications, skills being taught in current athletic programs at high school and collegiate level. Again, this is something that I believe and that should be, you know, um, be put on just on a bigger scale of awareness. I just think with all the diversity within high schools, public and private, there needs to be an awareness, um, identity with the just the diversity of multiculturalism, and when you're able to do that with sociocultural competency or in an intervention like the one I did, I think it could really benefit and help athletic teams. Future research, there needs to be continued research developed towards defining sociocultural competency within athletics. Research indicates that learned positive encounter in the past increases the chances for improved encounters in the future. Again, this is Vygotsky's view. He believed that if we had great interactions in the past, that similar interactions in the future could be positive. So I think the earlier we are able to develop sociocultural competency in a positive way within athletics, I think later down the road, not even in athletics, in the future, whenever individuals are encountered with other individuals of past cultural recognition, I think it could definitely develop an awareness and appreciation for people in their futures. So another reason why I think sociocultural competency is such a big thing here for my research project and why I chose to defend it. Uh, References. Thank you so much for listening and partaking in this. I look forward to seeing you guys, come on graduation. And if you have any questions, please leave them down in the remarks. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me and defend my article, or excuse me, defend my capstone project. Thank you so much.